Gideon or Gidon. Dr. Hamp, he says, I know a few individuals who say that El Elyon is not Yehovah, and that Israelites are really quasi-Canaanites. I know this to be totally false, and I have my arguments for it. Okay? Um, yeah, so there's a lot of things in this statement slash question here. El Elyon, so El means God, means mighty one. Elyon means the most high. Okay, so this would be the God most high. So if El Elyon is not the God most high, then well, who is he? And I thought we were worshiping the most high God. I was hoping so anyway. So all I know is I worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has revealed himself to us in a collection of books that we often refer to as Biblia, as the books, the Bible. All right, and in this collection of Biblia, of books, we have things like Genesis that gives us the history of Abraham, which also includes the history of Isaac and Jacob. And in there, we have a number of epithets, all right, titles for this being who has revealed himself with the name Yud He Vav He. I believe the pronunciation is Yehovah, but be that as it may, this being has declared himself to be Yud He Vav He. He also calls himself El Elyon. He calls himself El Shaddai. He has a number of different epithets that he uses to describe himself. And when we get to the book of Exodus, chapter 3, Moses says, well, what name should I tell him? And he says, Eheye asher eheye. I am who I am, or I will be that which I will be. Various translations to that. One is you could argue that it's I am being who I am being. So basically, I am who I am. All right, or I am that I am is the kind of most basic translation of that. So he says, tell them that I am, Eheye, sent you. All right, but then later in the same chapter, he says, and this is my name forever. This will be an everlasting memorial, Yud He Vav He, which is probably Yehovah, right? Yehovah, made up of three Hebrew words. The word Haya was, Hove is, and Yihye will be, right? And so that's probably the complete summary of the idea of God, who was, who is, and who will be. All right, this is Yud He Vav He. So the idea that this is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would be very, very disturbing. And I've also heard people suggest that, oh no, that's not really his name. But I would dare argue that these people probably don't know Hebrew. They're probably just posers. They think they know Hebrew, but they actually don't. They probably learned a couple things watching a YouTube video or two, but that doesn't make you actually somebody who has actually studied Hebrew. And so there's a big difference in the two. Why is that important? Because when you actually take the time to study the Hebrew and you can read the Bible in Hebrew, you see that name is used all over the place. It's used, the new name Yud He Vav He, probably it's pronounced Yehovah, is used 6,827 times if my memory serves me correctly. That's a lot of times to be talking about this particular God. And if that is a false God, then you really would have to throw out the entire Bible, because that name is used throughout the Bible. It's certainly the Hebrew Bible, that is the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, which Jesus referred to all the time, which Paul quoted from all the time, which Peter quoted from all the time, right? So you see the problem here. If the Hebrew Bible is corrupt and we're worshiping some false god, then the New Testament characters, Jesus and the disciples, etc., then they were also worshiping and teaching about the wrong God. And so that, therefore, you got to throw the whole thing out. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. So I don't see any reason to believe that. Now, the idea that the Israelites were worshiping Canaanite gods, that's a completely different question, because we do, in fact, see evidence that Israel was worshiping Canaanite gods, right? I mean, it's clearly in the Bible. God is upset with Israel, and he makes it very clear that he's upset with Israel for worshiping false gods all over the place, right? He says, you know, you're worshiping all these false gods. You're worshiping under every green tree on every mountain. You're going after all these false gods. And archaeologists have, in fact, dug up all these false gods. They've dug up all these little figurines, thousands and thousands and thousands of them everywhere throughout Jerusalem. They were everywhere. That was the problem, is that they were worshiping false gods, Canaanite gods. So yeah, they were worshiping false gods, but to say that Yehovah is a false god, no. Now it's interesting. There's a place called Kuntilit Ajrud that there was an inscription was found. It had this really weird looking figurine on it. We're not really quite sure what to make of that. I'm going to see if I can pull that up for you. See, I can still spell it Kuntilit Ajrud. Kind of a weird thing here, but if I can find that, yeah, here we go. I found the drawing. Don't you just love the internet? Okay, so it's a very odd kind of thing. I'm going to pull this up so you can see this on my screen, and it'll just give you a sense of all the weirdness that was going on back in the day. All right, so here we are. So this right here, this rather disturbing picture, let's see, maybe I can get it a little bit bigger for us. Hopefully I can. There we go. All right. So now on this, it talks about to Yehovah, to Yud-He-Vav-He, and his Asherah, Ve'ashrato. All right. Now, what does that mean? Well, we don't really know. Okay. And the question, you know, who are these figures on this thing? All right. So this is the 8th century BC. This is graffiti. And I actually did some research on this thing. It's kind of interesting. But what they were doing is they were not saying no to Yehovah, but they were just adding other gods. This is called syncretism, where they would say, yes, of course we believe in Yehovah. We believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Obviously, it's like, duh. But we also believe and worship these other gods because we think they're pretty cool too. And so it's not that they said no to Yehovah, but they added other gods alongside him. And that, of course, is a problem. That's called syncretism. God does not, it's not that he's just upset about this. You know, he's like, stop it. But it's false. That's really the biggest problem. It's just false. And you start putting your trust in false gods, you're going to get bad results. I mean, it's just really kind of simple mathematics or simple, principles of business, right? If you make bad business decisions, you'll have bad consequences as a result. And so that's essentially what Israel was doing, is they were making these or putting their hope in gods that did not exist, in gods that were not real, and hoping that these that by somehow appeasing these different gods, that things would go well for them. But of course, it didn't. So we do know that Israel was going after false gods, sadly, but that is no relation to Yehovah, the true God of the Bible. So thank you for that question, Gideon.